What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 826. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what's going on, man? You ready to do a show?
Oh yeah, man. There are some good news on the Limited front for fans of Cube, for fans of Limited. We got some fun stuff to talk about, and also this has got a good show lined up.
We do. We've got three things to talk about today. We've got two big news items, as Luis alluded to, and then we're going to go deep into some of the reasons why we approach things the way that we approach things here on LR, and why we have since the very beginning of starting the show. That's how deep we're going today. It's going to be a good one. And before we get in, though, we want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. Our Patreon over there is patreon.com/limitedresources. You get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail, no matter what level you're at. And it really means a lot to us to support us. So thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. We also want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard for their support of the show. If you play a lot of paper Magic, you know the cards pile up and you need to protect them. They're valuable, right? They're hard to replace. Sometimes they're worth a ton of money. And if you need to protect them on an individual card level, well, you need some sleeves. If you have a deck that you need to protect, you're going to need a deck box, or maybe a long box to protect multiple decks. And if you've got a whole collection of cards, you're going to need binders, ways to move them around, backpacks, all that kind of stuff. And that's where Ultimate Guard comes in. They use the best products, the best materials for their products. Seriously, really high quality stuff, really well thought out designs, all the way from kind of clean, basic monocolor designs all the way up to crazy stuff with stuff from Magic and other IPs in there as well. You can check it all out at ultimateguard.com, and you can pick up your whatever you want from them from your favorite online retailer or local game store. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. We've got a Patreon question of the week before we get into the big news items here, Luis. This one comes from Eli, who says, "Hi, Marshall and Luis. Sometimes when you look at a good card, you say something like, 'I'll take this card early and often.' Other times you'll say something like, 'I always want one of these in my deck, but the second drops off fast.' Can you expand on that? What characteristics can I use to identify which cards are better or worse in multiples?"
Well, there's no like hard and fast rule, but generally, here are some of the characteristics. The main one is cost. The more expensive a card is, the less likely that you want multiples of it, just because like you don't need a second 6-drop or a second 7-drop that much, even if it's a good card. I mean, this goes out the window a little for the most powerful cards. Like if we're talking, 6 mana win the game type cards, Grave Titan, let's just say, right? In any normal limited format, like, yeah, you'll take the second Grave Titan because it's amazing. But when you're looking at, just like a solid uncommon level, like good uncommon 6-drop, well, the second one is worth less than the first one. The other is a narrow effect. So a good example is deal 1 to all creatures, or an effect like that, or a shock, just deal 2 to a creature. Those are both effects that like get a little worse in multiples. Deal 3s and deal 4s don't really get worse in multiples. You're never going to run out of targets. The third deal 2, you really run the risk of playing against someone who just has a lot of X3s, and then you're not really that happy. And then something with like a very specific effect that you just don't want numerous of, like, well, I like card draw, but like you don't want that much like expensive card draw, like, or chunky card draw, like something like once you have like, to use Final Fantasy, I guess you had like, once you had 2 combat tutorials, the third one's usually going to be worth less than like a removal spell, even if combat tutorial is among the best cards. So those are kind of the main things I would look for. High cost, narrow effect, or like specifically good against a certain class of cards, like a deal 2.
Yeah, I would add on to the cost part as well. Specific types of costs also add up, particularly ones that ask you to sacrifice things. One of the card types that comes up often in this, in the sense of second one falls off sharply, third one you often just don't want at all, are a black spell that asks you to sacrifice a creature or some other type of permanent to destroy a permanent on the other side. A lot of times the first one of those can be very good, right? Because you will have one extra thing or one creature that's kind of outlived its life on the battlefield, and you don't mind throwing it away. But when you look at a hand that has 2 of those, you are often backed up on resources enough so that you may not be able to resolve the second one, or if you can, it's too costly to do so. What you're really fighting with this, right, is the balance between how often you draw a desirable effect versus the downside of drawing too many of that narrow but desirable effect. And that's what we're trying to balance out. Where, sometimes a desirable effect really asks nothing of you. Like if it's, let's say it's a 2-mana removal spell says kill a creature. Well, of course there is an upper bound to how many of those you would want, but it's quite high, right? We're talking 5 or 6 of them or something like that, where you first start to go, maybe I don't need another one of these things, but it's not 2 and it's not 3. You would happily play 3 of those type of cards in your deck. And that's because they ask almost nothing of you. But if you're talking about the narrow cards, like what Luis was talking about with sweepers that deal a certain amount of damage, imagine any hand that has 2 of those in it. And it's hard to imagine that ever being good, right? The first one might be good, but the second one, you've already cleared out all those small creatures and the second one's not as good. So those are definitely the type of things to keep in mind when you're looking at those. Most cards don't fall into that category. It's only when they get up into that upper, more expensive range like Luis described, or the weird cost or the very narrow effect that can be good. But if you ever ask yourself, what would I do if my opening hand had 2 of these in it, and you're starting to lean towards mulligan, that's probably a pretty good decision. And that's true for 7 mana cards, right? I mean, a lot of times if you have 2 7-drops in your opener, you're thinking, maybe I need to send this back. Maybe not, but maybe, right? And it kind of strikes your mind. If you have 2 Doomblades in your opener, you're never thinking like, too much really great removal, I'm going to ship it. You're thinking, sweet. And that's because that type of card asks very, very little of you. Great question, Eli. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's get to our 2 big news items, Luis. Wow. It has been a heck of a week to be a limited enthusiast. We'll start with a massive organized play announcement, the Magic Limited Championship. This is a event that will happen in 2027. I'm going to put links, by the way, to both of our big news announcements in the show notes so that you can check them out for yourself as well. This is a tournament that looks a lot like a Pro Tour, but it's all limited. It has a similar prize structure, a $500,000 prize pool. The top 8 players at the event get invites to the World Championship, and they're going to do a range of qualifiers. This event will be held in 2027, which means 2026 is the year that it gets seeded. And that is going to be, the qualifiers for that are going to be held at numerous places, including MagicCons, on Arena, at Spotlight Series events, which are kind of like, Grand Prix of yore, and at regional championship events as well. And then if you are on the Pro Tour, or if you're a Hall of Famer, Luis, you can qualify for this via your Pro Tour results and yearly invites as well. I mean, this is like the best thing I've ever seen. I mean, this is a straight up, like, when was the last limited PT? It was the one that John won in like 2007 or something?
Kuala Lumpur, yeah. I think that was the last all limited PT.
So we're coming up on 20 years since there's been a fully fleshed out high level professional event that was all limited, and now we're going to get one back.
It's super cool. Like, I don't know, it's a far enough away, which actually works in my favor. If it was now, I would definitely not be going. But if it's in, if it's in a year, I think there's a decent chance I could swing it. We'll have to see.
And how excited are you to see an event like this hit the airwaves?
Over the moon. Like, this is just perfect. Even if I don't end up making it, which, obviously is a possibility, I'll still be pretty happy to just know that this is occurring and watch it. But yeah, this looks incredible. Yeah,
they're going to call the qualifiers LTQs, Limited Championship Qualifiers, or LTQs. I guess it would be LCQs, right? Well, they said that they're called LTQs in the announcement, so whatever. Yeah, this is big for us. I mean, to have the highest level spotlight in competitive play shine right on the thing that we love is awesome. And I think it's a really great chance for us limited players to show Wizards of the Coast that we love and support this, and that it's an important part of the Magic ecosystem. I mean, I think that, over the last 4 or 5 years or so, I think every part of Magic has had to kind of look in the mirror a little bit about, am I justified Am I justifiable in a world where Commander dominates the landscape in such a big way, right? Wizards of the Coast has to look at every marketing dollar and every decision and, every hour of work and everything and kind of say, okay, but should we just be putting this towards Commander, or is it worth it to do something else? And, that includes the Pro Tour and all, limited and all the stuff that we love. And this to me was a very, very big stamp on, we do care about limited. We want people to be playing this. And it's, I think it's going to drive a huge amount of interest in limited as well.
Yeah, this just looks incredible, and I'm feeling very optimistic about what this means for not only just myself playing in it, but also just like, oh, they do value limited. They want this to happen. It's just really, really cool.
Yeah, of course, the hope is that this goes really well, and we see these again and again. Because this is a special thing, and I especially think that the high level competitive players are going to be really, really excited about it. So again, I'll put a link to that in the show notes so that you can read the details. But wow, I just can't wait to be at that event. Like, I really want to commentate that thing and be in that room.
I would suspect you'll have a good shot of doing so.
I hope so. I would love it. And we've got another big announcement too. Again, this is just a crazy week. I kept seeing stuff coming across the ticker and I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. You've known about this for a while, Luis, because I saw you did a video on it already. Vintage Cube is on Arena now. What? Like, where did this come from?
So yeah, Wizards talked to me a couple weeks ago, like a month ago, something like that, and they're like, "Hey, we're putting Powered Cube on Arena, and we want you to highlight it." And so, like a good bro,
what did you say? Yeah,
I was like, I think it would be even better if we got Cheon in the mix too.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, bring up the boys.
And we ended up getting together a bunch of the team CFB, TCG player, Ultimate Guard guys, Reed and Andrea and Martin, and then some of my buddies who from the Cube Draft server like Mac and RD and Mark, and we ended up doing some arena drafts on Arena, and then the videos came out this week, and they made the whole announcement and all that. But there's a couple things that I think are really cool about this. Number one, the cube is a vintage cube. It is called the Powered Cube for a good reason. They wanted to separate it from the vintage format. They don't need to, be calling it the exact same thing. But it is a cube that it doesn't have a bunch of crazy alchemy cards. It doesn't they put almost every single card on Arena that needs to be in the cube. There's a couple. So actually it's funny, the architect of all this initially was Alex Werner, who, he sent in the puzzling, sign off that we did a couple weeks ago. I've known Alex forever. He's just a Magic player from California, so we go way back. And he wrote an article that basically a couple of years ago, he basically decided he wanted to do this, and he's a coder for Arena, and he got permission to spend a couple hours a week on it. And he was just plugging away, adding cards. And it turned out there's a couple cards they couldn't get in. Shallow Grave and Corpse Dance, because they cared about Graveyard Order, which I totally agree with. Graveyard Order is a nonsense mechanic. And it was also Through the Breach because of Splice onto Arcane, which also makes sense to me. Like they don't want to put in this new mechanic for one card. That isn't really.
And that's not really what the card is. Honestly, it feels like they could just make a reprint without that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they design-wise chose not to have any of the initiative or monarch cards, which they could have, and I think that's totally good too. And so overall, they are basically making it into what we would expect out of a vintage cube. It's not going to be exactly the same, but I think that's fine too. It has Tolarian Academy, it has Sneak Attack, it has Reanimate, it has Thoughtseize, it has Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze, Lion's Eye Diamond. It just has all the hits. It has Minsc and Boot, it has Flash. It doesn't have any Universes Beyond cards, which, I like the One Ring and Lorien Revealed and Orcish Bowmasters well enough. Those cards are cool cards from Lord of the Rings, right? There's one thing that is actually kind of funny is there's no Universes Beyond cards, but there is some Through the Omen Paths cards, because those aren't technically Universes Beyond, which that feels to me like a little
Come on, yeah.
Okay, I guess so. But No, it is great. Like I am very happy with how it's going to play out. I think like it just looks awesome to me.
And this is going to be best of one or best of three when it comes out.
Yeah, so they have best of one and best of three with various prize structure, and I think that I don't really know. I didn't really look at the entry fee and the rewards, but it is going to be. I think it is going to be ranked. So.
Oh, really?
Let me see. Let me just make sure.
Yeah, I am going to put the link to that article as well, so people can brush up on it.
Yeah, it's going to be ranked. Best of one is ranked. So I think that's going to be cool. The other thing, we're going to get 17 lands data for cubes. So I want to think about some predictions to make.
No, this is bad.
No, it'll be fun. It'll be funny because honestly, like if you looked at 17 lands data for cube and the conclusion was like Underworld Breach has a really low win rate or whatever.
Yeah.
That wouldn't mean much to me because I know when it's good
and
I know when it's not. And it's like, okay, well, people put in their decks when it's not good. That's fine. That doesn't really, it will be, I think the white cards, the white aggro cards will have very high win rates. That is my assumption.
Definitely. And mono red still isn't a thing in the current iteration, right? There was a time when mono red was a decent performer in cube, but people just tended not to draft it.
It is one of the supported archetypes.
It is? Okay. So maybe it's okay. I know white has been kind of the sleeper best deck for a while now. It's just, not that many people want to draft it. But if you make it ranked, they certainly will.
Yeah.
You are getting mana tithed left and right. So this comes out on October 28th. We're recording this on the 24th. That's next week, man. This is...
Dude, I'm going to get you to have Vintage Cube on my phone. Are you kidding me?
This is unbelievable. So two things I wanted to bring up before we go to our main topic here. One of them is that Luis already you have one video up on your channel, right? Do you have another?
I have one on TCG Player's channel, the CFB TCG Player channel. And that one's really funny. I actually think that there's a nice twist during the draft portion,
okay,
to say the least. And then I have one up on my channel that went up where I get to cast a Booster Tutor. So it's actually funny. Booster Tutor is one of the only cards that they put in the set that are in the cube that is like a little bit like, oh, this feels alchemy-ish, but it's not really. And it is actually in a lot of paper cubes. So I think it's really neat.
Yeah, I think that does seem to be a cool exception. Also, your game against Reed was kind of absurd. That's
I got so unbelievably lucky against Reed.
That was really nice. Okay, so there's that, and then how do you think this affects Magic Online? Like, are they screwed now? Like, it felt like, that was kind of the main draw. I mean, there's a few other things they offer. Commander, like 4-player Commander. They offer Vintage and Legacy. It's a different client and a different vibe. But I mean, I kind of viewed Magic Online, at least for my uses, as kind of my Vintage Cube machine. Is this going to draw me away from that?
That's what that's what Daybreak views Magic Online too. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that the lion's share of their revenue is coming. Maybe not the lion's share of their revenue overall is just Cube, but like the things Magic Online I think does best right now are Cube and Modern. Those are like probably the two most popular formats without digging into it, but that's just my assumption.
Okay.
And I think that Daybreak is gonna have to, I don't know about react to this, but this is gonna be unfortunate for them. So
okay.
We'll see how that all turns out. But yeah, it is definitely going to make an impact, I would assume.
Yeah. So that was one thing that stood out to me just as a longtime Magic Online user. I'm mainly on Arena these days, but I do use Magic Online for Vintage Cube still. And I am curious to see after this comes out if it has like a major impact on that or not. Anyway, something to keep our eye out on, but this is overall very exciting news. This also I don't know what the schedule is going to be like, Luis, for how often we have Vintage Cube up on Arena. That was always a question that Magic Online had to deal with, which is like, do we just want to leave it up all the time, but then it becomes less special? And I'm curious to see how Arena, approaches that problem. But I mean, we've been doing Vintage Cube set reviews where we handle each color for the past, year and a half or something. We kind of sprinkle in those things. But buddy, we may need to go all the way, on a full on card by carder on this thing, because if this is going to be opened up to an audience as big as the one on Arena. I mean, we just kind of need a show out there that says this is how we feel about each and every one of these cards. So
I totally agree. I actually wrote an article for TCG Player that's going to go up early next week that is basically like how to draft Arena Cube, how to draft the Arena powered cube, which aimed at people who have not. And it's a bit of a, it's a base level breakdown, but I think that there's going to be a lot of people who would not have drafted Cube on Magic Online, but would love to draft Cube here. And I think that's awesome. So I look forward to trying my best to support those and make it as approachable as possible, because Cube is tough. My shorthand advice is Cube, just like any limited format, has different archetypes that you have to learn. Yeah. A good way to learn Cube is to just tunnel on like 2 to 3 is totally fine. Let's say you know how to draft, like you're learning and getting more acquainted with how to draft like Boros, like red, white aggro, and maybe something like a sneak attack deck or a reanimator deck or like green ramp or blue control, but like not all of them, just pick like 2 and then just draft one of those 2 every time until you feel more comfortable drafting other things. Because look, day one, I wouldn't recommend you take Underworld Breach, Yawgmoth's Will, or even really Tolarian Academy necessarily, because the artifact deck is actually kind of straightforward, but like there's still some intricacies to it, and I think that you will pick those up over time. But in order to not feel completely overwhelmed, in order to not feel like you're just hemorrhaging gems, I think going in like I'm gonna bias towards red white, but when that's not open, or I open a really powerful card in another color, I'll try to learn those decks as well. You don't have to know it all to begin with. In fact, I know some people who have cubed hundreds of times who just don't draft specific decks because they don't like them or whatever. And that is a just totally fine approach to have.
I would say most people I know that draft Vintage Cube that aren't on the server or whatever, they usually have about 2 decks that they're really comfortable in, and they kind of, and they don't overlap. And so it's like, oh, I got the Reanimator, I'll go that direction, or I got the green based whatever, and I'll go that direction. And that's kind of it. And you know what? One of the really great things about Cube is that it is open enough that you can often put together a deck almost predetermined. It's just a matter of how powerful it is. Now, if you want to optimize, which of course you're an LR listener, you probably do, then you're going to need to be willing to push your boundaries and dive into different archetypes. One of the things that always stands out about the way that you draft, Luis, yes, you have your pet decks and stuff, but you will draft basically anything, and you are proficient at all of the archetypes. And that's really hard. That takes a long time to get good and understand the subtleties and what's really important. The big expensive cards, not expensive, the big flashy cards are kind of obvious, but there's so much nuance past that, getting your mana right and all that kind of stuff too. And I mentioned it before, but Luis has a video up on his channel and up on TCG Player. I cannot recommend these videos highly enough. I know I'm obviously biased, but I was just talking to Adam the other day, and he was just saying that he looks forward to watching your draft video every single day. He gets up, and once your video goes up, he's firing it off, and he loves to watch how you navigate these things, because what he told me is, he said, I wish I could see the game through his brain just like for a day, right? He just wants to be able to LSV his way through a draft, just for a day. And if you are, going to be trying to rank up and stuff on Arena, watching Luis draft is a great way to really understand some of the pitfalls and some of the hidden cards and stuff in Cube. Okay, so those are our 2 big announcements. Amazing stuff. What a time to be alive, Luis. For our main show, we've got a few extra episodes now, given that we kind of sidestepped through the Omen Pass Spider-Man set. And we thought we would use one of them as a level up episode, which we're going to do today. That's kind of, I would say it's like the biggest picture view of a level up episode that we could get. We've been doing the show for so long now that it can get a little bit lost about why about why we originally started. And I think it's useful even though I think most of our audience knows what our core values are here, I think it's really good to reiterate those and just kind of say why and how that formed and what those are. And, some of the things that we like to talk about that provides the structure for the more specific things that we talk about. Because I think if you look at LR, there's 2 big tracks that we're on. The first one are universal kind of game theory style things that can help you become a better gamer, a better Magic player, and in some places, sometimes even improve your life, about making decisions within your life for all different types of things monetarily and even down to personal stuff and all that kind of thing. And then the other thing that we provide is a more topical, current set level stuff, namely, like the set reviews, right? Where we're giving you our information about what we think about the card so that you have that leg up going into the next set. But those aren't evergreen. Those are specific to the set. So I thought we'd break down some of that today and talk about when Ryan and I first started LR originally. And this kind of sets the stage for these things that we talk about all the time on the show, or that underpin a lot of the concepts, which was that we wanted to translate some of the concepts that we had learned in poker. I had, started to become a more serious poker player. And that was my first exposure to real gaming, to like game theory and trying to figure out the best way to approach these problems. And with the end result of winning more. That was what I really wanted. I didn't really care that much, about like having fun at playing poker. I mean, I found it fascinating, but it wasn't for entertainment. I was like, how can I become the best that I can at this?
This is a job.
As a job, which it ended up becoming. It wasn't quite at this time. But yeah, and we wanted to apply a similar framework and approach to our Magic playing and see if those concepts transferred over. We figured that they would. Ryan kind of knew that they would, because poker had undergone kind of like this strategic evolution that took it from kind of, I think, what we think about with like old school poker, where it's like, I'm going to try to read my opponent.
Well, that was all poker's movies, like the guys staring at each other, like
exactly.
And then they'll be like, I will call and raise you, which is also not like illegal maneuver to do. It's game betting or whatever.
No,
but
totally.
Like, that's what poker. When I was a kid and I watched movies about poker or fictional representations of poker, the first thing you thought of was like, oh, tells and reading people. And it's just like,
right.
There's probably more of that in poker than in Magic, because in poker, there's like one piece of information that's hidden. It's those two cards. That's it. Mm-hmm. Magic, there's a lot of hidden information, so someone can be reacting to a different thing. In poker, if they're reacting to something, it really is just there's not that many options what it could be.
Right.
But just like in Magic, can you be a world-class Magic player and have no reads on someone? Yes. There's a lot of world-class Magic players who don't play into that stuff at all.
Totally.
I tend to a little bit, but not even a lot. Like, it's just, we're not as good at that as we think we are.
That's right. And that's the thing that came out during this time, was that even people who were renowned for having that ability to read their opponent, when they actually looked into it, they were like not that much better at making decisions than other people. It
like
turns out it's like
sommeliers, and like they couldn't actually identify wine all that well.
Exactly. It's the same thing, right? And it's like, maybe it's a tiebreaker, or maybe there are very specific circumstances where you go, I've seen this so many times, even from the same player, and I just know they called really quickly, and they do that only when they have this type of hand or something like that. Okay, maybe. But people were basing their whole strategic output on, oh, he put his hand over his nose, and it's like, we just knew, and everybody knew at this point in poker, that just wasn't the way to move forward. And so, one of the concepts that came out as a result of that was a simple one that underpins a lot of what we do here, which is the idea of not being results oriented, meaning taking the time to like run the numbers if you could, or focus. And instead, this is the key here, is that you focus on the decision that you made and the information that you had when you made it. That's where you put your mental, logical, even emotional energy, not on what ended up happening in the hand. And that for me was kind of a game changer, right? Like, just in the way that you approach problems and the way that you approach anything in life, that was a very, very big wake up call for me, where I don't know. I mean, I think you can probably see this in your everyday life all the time, where people are just very much willing to accept that something was correct if the outcome worked out in their favor or in somebody else's favor.
Totally. It's a very natural thing when people are like, oh, well, I didn't think that was a good decision, but it looks like it worked out. It's like, well, that doesn't make it a good decision. And we talked a lot about about kind of results oriented thinking. And honestly, I think this whole topic, what we're talking about today, is ultimately what I think our show does best. Like,
yes.
I mean, I think applying these to magic through the frame of magic, we talk about magic basically every single episode. I don't think there's been a single episode where we've not talked about magic at all, because this is a magic podcast. But if I had to point at what the most useful thing people get from LR and we get from LR, like us talking about this is good for us too, is understanding things like all of these different, cognitive biases that we're about to talk about, things like what heuristics are and why they're useful, and the thing I think like that I have gotten from magic itself that's the most valuable is this frame of reference, this way of viewing the world that isn't results oriented, that does understand, hey, if you try your best and you do the best thing you can and you get a bad outcome, well, then you did what you could. You're not, it doesn't really help you to get frustrated about it, and you learn about how to deal with that. So
that's right.
Basically, I think this is a good refresher for those, because we talk about these concepts almost every show. Also, when we talk about the set review, we use these concepts even if we don't explicitly say it. So it's good to just give people kind of a list of like, here's the actual things that we're talking about and referencing.
That's right, because like in the example that you just gave, you do something, the thing doesn't work out, and you get frustrated about it. It gets worse, right? Because sometimes somebody does something what we would call incorrectly. It doesn't work out. Or they do it correctly and it doesn't work out. It doesn't really matter. And they get frustrated about it, but then they also change their behavior. So that's a disaster in the scenario that you actually did it correctly and it wasn't in the cards that particular time. Because for the most part, what we're really talking about with magic and with life and with poker are what we call multivariate problems, right? Things that have many inputs that will affect the outcome. And it's very, very difficult for us to account for properly all of the inputs to actually get us to the number that we want. And even if we do, let's say we're able to do that, we run it through some AI program or something like that, and it says, okay, yeah, you're 64%. Like to be successful in whatever it is that you're trying to do here. Well, most people would do that, right? But that means that 36% of the time you don't succeed at the thing you want, even doing it the best way that you possibly could. And that's where we really want to try to knock these off. We really want to try to move up the focal point of your decision making to the point at which it is most effective to the outcome, which is not when you're already at the outcome. And that's where people put a whole heck of a lot of their time and energy. Now, what came out of this, the results-oriented thinking, we called it don't be roddy at the time, or focusing on the decisions. We called it DNR, decisions, not results, right? These mentalities push your decision-making process earlier in the flow, and they reveal something that Luis just mentioned, which are called cognitive biases. These are, usually fairly well-studied things that our human brains, for probably evolutionary reasons, have us go a bit astray. And they are things that human beings more or less constantly fall for, and they can lead you off the path of the best result possible because it requires being a bit uncomfortable to pull yourself out of these things and hold yourself to a higher standard, one that has been studied and that is evidence-based rather than what your monkey brain tells you when something bad happens to you. Because, think about, just the most basic thing. The very most basic thing is when something bad happens to you, some part of you decides, I don't want to do that anymore. Right? Even if the thing that you did mathematically was definitely correct. You stood a chance to gain much, much more than you lost. It just so happens that this one time you happen to lose, you are going to feel a recoil from that tells you, don't do that anymore. That hurt.
And I think that is evolutionarily useful because the penalty for a bad thing happening is pretty big, especially in a lot of circumstances. You eat the wrong kind of berries and you die, or you get really sick. Maybe you learn from that, or you go to fight some kind of animal that you're not equipped to fight and you get mauled and you get a big cut on your leg, you might just die from an infection. So we are hardwired to do that, which is also part of it. It can work in your favor because one of the things that I think is helpful is making a mistake in practice. I always like when that happens. You screw something up in practice And then you're like so much less likely to mess it up in the actual arena that you care about.
Right. Where you can kind of set yourself a sandbox aside where you can make these mistakes and then not carry the real ones in. So let's talk about some of these, the most common cognitive biases that affect us, Magic players, people that think about the world this way. The one that you can see kind of everywhere, especially now online, particularly, is confirmation bias. This is usually where you've kind of already made up your mind about something, and it leads you to unconsciously seek out things that back that up and simultaneously ignore things that don't back that up because they don't fit your view, right? You know, a good example would be in our current world, right? Politics seems to dominate a lot of conversations, right? And most people fall kind of on one side or the other. So imagine the politician or the political figure that you disagree with the most, right? So whoever that is, put them in that seat. And then if somebody comes up and says they actually did a really good thing, like they did a really good job, you are going to feel inside of you the urge to find what they did wrong or why the thing that they didn't do was actually, or the thing that they did do was actually bad, or to mitigate it. Where if you were being completely honest and the person who you do support, if they had done that, it would have been cheers and thumbs up and this is why I support you. And that's an example of confirmation bias. You are going to look and even sometimes fabricate and find things that back up your worldview. An example that's more pertinent to Magic, would be something just as simple as you blaming something that's actually random for your loss rather than your play, but rather than what you did. Well, I lost a die roll, so I couldn't win. Well, we all know that the die roll does matter. So yeah, okay, fair enough. That is a contributing factor. But have you exhaustively looked at your gameplay? Have you practiced this matchup enough? Are you top tier at actually playing this out and understanding what's going on? Because your worldview probably includes, now I'm not saying this for our limited resources listeners and viewers because they tend to be more on the curious, open-minded side. But I mean, everybody knows a player at their local game store, a friend of theirs or whatever, who's just begging to blame their losses on literally anything else because their worldview is, I'm good at this and I deserve to win these games. And if I don't, I need to reach out and find why. And that's because they need to confirm that they are actually good at this. And I mean, Luis, everybody has a friend like that, right? That just
most definitely.
Yeah. And it's just, and it goes the other way too, where, if you win a game, well, it's because I'm good. Right? It's like I thought really hard and I took some time to build my deck and I've practiced this format. So I'm good. Therefore, I earned it. I deserve to win. And when I do, it's like, well, yeah, thumbs up. Of course I won. Like that's how the world is supposed to be. But if you look, maybe if you say have 17 lands and you can look at your win rate and maybe it's 58%, maybe it's 55, like the average 17 lands player, right? Well, that's a lot of losing coming your way. 45% of the time you're going to lose the match, right? That may not line up with what you see. And, the real answer is that you're not good enough. Your 55 could be 68, like Luis or, somebody with a, really high win rate on Arena, right? And that was the result of Luis being perhaps better at this at a baseline, plus putting in his 10,000 hours with Paul, plus years and years on the Pro Tour, plus making videos and doing podcasts and having immersed himself in Magic for all of these years. That's how he gets to that level. But most of us haven't done that. And most of us sit down in that 50-something% win rate. And when we don't, when those losses start to come in, as they should, we start to confirmation bias away why we're losing or in fact why we're winning.
Well, one of the most, I think, valuable things that Mana Screw brings to Magic, honestly, is something people can blame their losses on.
Yes.
Like it's one of the things like for example, League of Legends makes a lot of money off the fact that you can always blame your teammates for your losses. Because Look, we're not talking about LR listeners here, because if you're listening to us and you want to try to improve, and that's like a big part of what what you're getting out of this, you're not going to be in this mindset. But a lot of people will, like you said, cast for anything they can possibly blame except for themselves, because and that's also fine. I really don't look down on that, because at the end of the day, you're playing a game for fun. If you don't care about improving and you just want to have fun, and it is more fun for you to pretend like you weren't the person who screwed it up, that's fine. I don't think that's the best attitude to have for life in general. I think in general, the most useful thing when something goes wrong is trying to figure out what you could do differently, what went wrong. But if you want to blame other things, you obviously can. I think that people are really prone to want to not be at fault in spots like this, and it's a very tempting thing, which confirmation bias plays into very nicely.
Another one that comes up, particularly in booster draft, is anchoring bias. And this is the name given to our tendency to more strongly value early information we get soon in a process rather than later information. We have a weird tendency to really grab onto the first few things that we see and kind of go, okay, that's the way it is. And then when more information comes in later, we will subconsciously downgrade the value of that information for some reason. And, booster draft's a good example of this, where maybe you get an early signal, that green is open or whatever. You just get one good card passed to you, pick 3 or something like that. And now I can't tell you how many times I've seen people just make up their mind, right? That green's open. That's it. Like, there's no more further scrutiny given to it. And even if later information is coming in saying it is not open, and that was just a fluke pack or a weird situation that happened, they will not let go of it. Well, we know green is open because I saw this thing pick 3. And this is also, by the way, why we advocate for reading signals as data points rather than trying to plant your flag on any one card. There are
many accumulation of data. There's no one pack. Someone can, like, even in Vintage Cube, let's just use that example. Someone could pass you an Ancestral Recall and be playing blue. They just happen to open Time Walk at the same time.
Right.
And this is going to come up a lot in actually Powered Cube, because like you could get a 5th pick, like Swords to Plowshares, and be like, whoa, white's open. But it's like, no, the white Winnie player took Parallax Wave because that was better for them. And then the Artifacts player who's playing blue-white took Balance because that's better for them. And then the next 2 people weren't playing white or whatever. Like, this can always happen.
Totally. And, to me, if you were to try to push back on this anchoring bias, you would say, wow, okay, pick 3, I got a really great green card. Green might be open. And then the next pack, you go, okay, well, there wasn't any green here, but again, data point, right? So I'm like, still might be open. And then you go, pick 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's no green. You should be saying, maybe I've got a lot more data now, right? I have 6 picks past my first big data point, and I've not seen any more green. I am not as confident at this point where, this anchoring bias would lead you to kind of, plant your flag a little too early. Another one, it's a really simple one, and it relates to what we talked about a little bit earlier about not wanting to lose. It's called loss aversion. And it reminded me of a quote from one of my favorite movies, Moneyball, where the main character, played by Brad Pitt, says, I hate losing even more than I want to win. And that really resonates, right? Like, there is something about winning that feels like justice and losing that feels like angering injustice. And we can innately fear losing the game more than we value winning it. And that's something that you just need to have in mind in the back of your head. One way that this can play out, for example, in a game of Magic, is we can be too conservative in game. I know you've seen this 100 times, Luis, where somebody they face a key inflection point where they need to take a very risky line in order to try to get any chance at all of winning, where if the game continues for 2 or 3 more turns from its current state and with the composition of their deck, they are not winning. Like, let's say they're the aggressive player. They got off to a quick start, but the opponent has just hit that turn where they've barely stabilized the board. And now the aggressive player has to decide what to do. And what they sometimes do, and I think it's in large part due to this loss aversion, is they go, okay, well, if I make this play, I won't lose this turn. And then they do that again and again, and they basically lock themselves up for losing the game as a whole, just not right now. Where if they were willing to take a risk, say attack with all my creatures, I lose 3 of them, but I get in for 6, and I have 2 burn spells in my deck or whatever, they could give themselves that 5-10% chance of winning the game. Where if they just sit there and their opponent who's on control gets to go, okay, 5 drop, 6 drop, 7 drop, and you're drawing 2 drops, that is not, you don't really have a realistic avenue to win. So you would ask yourself, well, why wouldn't you try to take the percent that you could get? And the reason is that it's scary because you don't want to lose the game and you don't want to look like a sucker, desperate or making these reckless moves. But that is very much what needs to happen. And I think that loss aversion is behind a lot of that.
Yeah, it's very tempting to try to avoid pain, even if it's like very temporary. And our ultimate goal in these spots is to win the game. It's not to avoid a loss.
Right.
For 2 turns, 3 turns. You don't get extra points for taking them, like for making the game go longer.
Right. Another one of these biases is called self-serving bias. And this one is related to what we were talking about before, where we tend to credit ourselves for the good things we do, but when bad things happen, we tend to blame them on something or someone else. And the classic example for this in Magic are shuffler truthers. These are people who think that the online versions of Magic are rigged in some way against them when they have to mulligan a lot or when they lose the die roll a lot. And they'll say like, yeah, no, I had too many I won too many in a row. So now, the randomness is against me. But it is interesting because the one thing that
they found something else to blame, right?
Right. They found something else to blame. And it's interesting because one of the ways that you can see this come about is that when they do win or get lucky or things go their way, they never ever say, oh, well, the shuffler's rigged in my favor, right? And therefore against my opponent, because this is zero sum. If you win the die roll, that means your opponent lost it, right? And so that's just something to be aware of. It's similar to what we talked about before. But if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, when I complain about bad luck, which can be legit. Luck is real, that variance matters, etc. Totally. Do I ever do the other side of that equation? Do I ever say that was really lucky? I was way behind and I drew perfect, or I hit 3 die rolls in a row and then didn't have to mulligan or whatever. And if you don't have that balance, you're probably giving up a little bit of equity to the self-serving bias there too.
And it's also, it isn't important at the end of every game to litigate who got the most lucky, obviously. But if you are going to keep track or keep score, and if that's just part of what you feel like you got to do, you would be well served to keep score on both sides. Otherwise, you're just going to get frustrated. You're just going to feel, you're going to feel a lot worse.
Totally. Because if you're living in that world, you only feel that bad things happen to you. Right. And when good things happen to you, you don't recognize them at all. That's a tough world to live in. You're kind of banging your head against the wall constantly. Another one that we have a different name for on the show, but it's kind of clinical name or whatever, is optimism bias. And we call it best case scenario mentality on the show. The best example for this are when new cards come out and people will often read the card and they'll, in a vacuum, right? They're not actually playing the game. They're just reading the card. And they will only really consider the positive application of the card without putting it into context or being realistic about how it's actually used in a game, right? One that comes up a lot there's certain subset of cards that are really good, like blowout potential, if you are being attacked by a large number of creatures. And the truth is that people try to imagine these scenarios all the time, right? Where it's like, oh, my opponent's slamming in with 6 creatures and I'm going to play this conditional card and I'm going to blow them out. But they don't really consider that like Magic isn't set up for that. The rules of Magic basically favor the defending player. Blockers get the double block. They get position on the attacking player as far as casting instants and stuff like that. And they don't really think about the times where like you're winning. Let's say you're winning the game. Now, how good is a card that cares about being attacked by a huge group of opposing creatures? Well, it's terrible there, right? What about when you're at parity? Well, people don't just slam their whole board into your board when you're at parity. There's a reason that you're at parity, right? So that's not good. And of course, developing is the last of our quadrants, right? And for quadrant theory, which is, by the way, why quadrant theory exists, why Brian came up with it originally, is to help contextualize these and say, you have identified a scenario where this is really good. It's when you're way behind. Somebody's attacking you with a bunch. This is a card that can bail you out. Cool. But what about the others? And that'll give you a bigger picture. And so you just want to be careful when you're reading new cards and when you're trying to evaluate them that you don't fall for optimism bias and only view the good side of them. That is one part of it, but you do need to make sure that you go, well, what about these other scenarios? Like how good or bad is the card in those? Because you don't always have the card exactly in the scenario that you hope.
Yeah. I actually have a really good example of this. I still remember it's from the Dragons of Tarkir set review. There's a card called Inspiring Call. It's 2 and a green. It's an instant. It's uncommon. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures get indestructible until end of turn. So there was a counter theme, sure. I gave this card a low rating in my written CFB set review, and I remember someone argued with me for so long about how you're crazy. This card is good. That was a terrible rating you did. And he's like, minimum you're drawing 2 cards, and then it's probably going to save your creatures. I'm like, what are you talking about? Minimum is 0. The floor on this card is 0.
0.
In fact, the floor might be the most common output of this card if you look at it. Not when you cast it, because you're not casting it for 0, but when it's in your hand. So it's like, sometimes it's just crazy how people think about stuff like that.
Yeah, they get on that track, and it is hard to let go. And plus, it is more fun, right, to imagine the cards being good, right? And to getting excited about, oh man, my opponent could do this. And, that would be a cool story or whatever. So you don't want to like completely eliminate that, but you do need to have balance. Next one is one that affects all different portions of life in many different ways. It's a very common cognitive bias called the gambler's fallacy, which is, people think that randomness has a memory to it. If you've ever heard somebody say,
I flipped three flips in a row heads on Mana Crypt, I better name tails or I'm going to get screwed.
Right, exactly. Because they think it's due. If you've ever heard that too, this is due to come in.
The difference is I am due, but yes, otherwise what you're saying is correct.
Yeah. The truth is that each event is distinct from the other events, regardless of what happened before. And technically what will happen after. It does not affect that event. It does not matter if 1,000 times you flipped heads in a row, which is virtually impossible, but that it does not affect the next one. There is no such thing.
I would argue that if you flipped heads 1,000 times in a row, I would be looking at that coin. I would think that that is the most likely outcome, actually.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe you should actually bet on heads because something's broken there. But, if it's 10 times in a row or whatever, they are each individual distinct events with the same probability going in, again, assuming that the software is all correct and everything like that. What can you take away from it? Wasting your time, thought, and emotional energy on this kind of thinking is not the way to get ahead. Look, if you think that way, it doesn't change the outcome. And in many scenarios, it doesn't change your play either. Like if we're talking about the die roll and you're keeping track of it and it's been 6 times in a row and you say, okay, I should lose it. Well, in Magic, we don't bet on the die roll. There's nothing. It's just, it happens. And then one person wins and then the game actually starts. In gambling and in different forms of that is different. Poker, it comes up all the time where somebody's like, this thing happened to me this many times in a row, so I'm due for it not to. So therefore, I'm going to bet accordingly. And that is a huge mistake. And if you find yourself having that happen in Magic as well, then that's a big problem. But, even if it's not, even if it is, you're just complaining about the die roll, that is mental, emotional, logical energy that you could be putting to something more productive. This is a complete dead end. There is absolutely nothing to be gained from putting any amount of effort or energy into, again, the die roll as an example at all. Like there's just none. So all you're doing once you're starting to burn brain cycles, frustration, your tilt starts to build up because you feel wronged by the universe and you should be winning at least half of these die rolls, etc. That is effort, energy, and perhaps frustration that is going to contribute. At best case, you're not contributing to your win, and worst case, you're actually contributing to your loss because your frustration level might distract you from making the best play that you possibly can. The last one I wanted to talk about is another huge life and gaming cognitive bias, and it's called the sunk cost fallacy. And this is the idea that since you've already spent resources on something, continuing to do so is the correct thing, even if the circumstances have changed, because you don't want to leave behind what you've already invested. Even if, the best way to view this, the best way to view this would be, let's say it's me and I'm playing a poker hand or I'm doing an investment or I'm on a certain line of play for Magic. We'll use Magic as the example. I'm the aggressor. I had the 1, 2, 3 curve on an opponent that stumbled and I've got them down to 8. I am feeling good. Now, though, my opponent spent a turn or two getting their mana together and they've played a 4 and a 5 drop back to back, and I no longer am the aggressor. I may think in my mind, well, I've come this far. I've attacked all in a bunch of times. I just have to see this thing through because I've already spent a burn spell and I already used a combat trick and I already lost a creature to this line of play. I just need to see how it goes because I've already spent too much on this. Where if I said, time out, I'm going to tap in Luis. So I step away from the chair. Luis has no knowledge of the game at all. He just sits down, looks at my hand, looks at the board, looks at what's going on. And Luis at this point has no sunk cost. He doesn't even know what I put into this necessarily. And he is going to evaluate it from the perspective of where are we at right now? That's the key. You need to be able to do that all the time, to constantly reevaluate not what you've put into this in the past, but where are you at right now? And, Luis would be able to say, oh, well, I'm no longer the aggressor and I need to start taking a line of play that gives me the best chance of winning where I am not in a position to be able to attack my opponent over and over again. And this is, I don't know, how often would you say you have to do this, Luis? Like, I know this is subconscious for you, but like, is it every turn, every play, every card that comes out? Like, how often, are you reevaluating board states as you go?
I would say that in order to save mental energy, you really shouldn't be trying to decipher, analyze each turn from first principles. I know some people who did that and they played way too slow.
Yeah.
When meaningful things happen, you got to reevaluate. And so in your example, it's like, yeah, I'm the aggressor because you were stuck on lands. I got you down to 8 and all that. Once you play the second creature and I'm like, oh, I don't have a good attack here. It's like, am I the aggressor anymore? You kind of feel like, oh, wait, I actually might not be,
Right. And this comes up in life all the time too, especially with monetary stuff. It comes up in poker. A good example with monetary one would just be an investment. Let's say you put in a significant amount of money for a long-term investment and it starts to go downhill and you start to lose money. There are people that are just saying well, I already put in $1,000 and now it's down to 200 and I'm just going to hang on because I already put in this much, even though it's clear that it's going to zero. Right. So
this is the basis of the pig butchering scams, right? You get someone for $20,000 and then you get them for another $30,000 because they're chasing that $20,000 they already lost. And you keep dangling in front of them. Oh, you'll get your money back if you just put a little more in. And that is just a consistent thing that does happen.
Right. And it happens in many different avenues of life. And it can become very empowering to recognize sunk cost fallacy and know when to cut your losses. If that ship is going down, you get off of it. You don't just say, well, I put this much into it, I'm just going to go down with the ship. It's like, no, get out, save what you can. That is what somebody would do who didn't have the emotional hangups and baggage. They would show up. And if you said, hey, professional account manager person, you come in and you handle this, and they sit down at your computer and they go, okay, so you put 1,000 in, it's down to 200. They do some Googling around and they're like, oh no, this business is going out. This is federal indictment. They're done. Right. And you go, sell, I'll take my $200. Like I'd rather have 200 than 0, right? And that's it. And so, you need to learn. And then of course, there's flip sides to that coin as well. If you're doing true long-term investing, for example, you don't sell off at the moment that stuff starts to go down. You have to kind of ride the waves, and you have to understand that going in. But sunk cost fallacy comes up all the time in Magic, usually around two main things. One of them is lines of play that we already talked about. And the other one is, when is it appropriate to bail on a color and booster draft? You're 6 picks in, 4 of your picks are pretty good green cards, or maybe let's say three of them, but green hasn't, your first 2 were green and then you picked up a decent green card 4th, but then there's been nothing else. And it's starting to really look like your seat's supposed to be blue-black. And you're like, well, I've already invested my first 2 picks. It's like, well, you know what? There's the rest of this pack, a whole nother pack, and then a whole nother pack after that if you successfully can transition away from those first few picks and get into the seat that you're actually supposed to be in, you'll be much better off than trying to bang your head against the wall and fight just because you don't want to give up 1 or 2 picks early.
I think that one of the points that we always make when we're talking about draft is when you see a 4th pick good red card or 5th pick good red card, you're not taking it to compare with the 3 blue cards and 2 white cards you already have. Let's say it's 6th pick, but there's like a 2-mana deal 3 at common, right? Top common, whatever set it is. Well, when you see that 6, don't think of it as like, is this better than the 3 white cards or 2 blue cards I have? It's, will the future red be better than what I have, especially if you first picked a good white card, second picked a good white card, and then took 3 blue cards in a row? Well, yeah, you did invest your first and second pick. You sure did, but you haven't seen any other evidence that that's good. But you now have this evidence that someone's shipping a lightning strike 6th pick, and that is not a typical thing that happens.
Exactly. And, these are, again, we can show you specific examples of what not to do, like the one that Luis just said. But if you have a better understanding of why your brain tells you to just hang on for dear life, it can set you up to kind of solve the problem in a more permanent way. And also it allows you to apply these concepts to things that aren't Magic. And that's one of the great things about Magic, is that if you take the time to get actually good at it, it can in many ways teach you how to get really good at other things in life too, and to approach these problems with some structure, framework to them, so that you can try to make the best decisions over and over. Because one thing that I've learned after playing poker Magic and then various life things, like, leaving my job to do content creation and all that kind of stuff, is that it does take a little while, but the people that rise up are the ones that make the best decision they can over and over and over and over again. And if you zoom in on any one decision, there's a lot of variance to it. It might work out, it might not have. But people that really think about it and try hard to make good decisions over and over, the little graph goes up and to the right, and it just kind of keeps on going. They start to compound on each other, right? These decisions that you make. And that is where, you can see a meaningful change, not just in your Magic game, but in your life as well. Just to kind of recap, these biases and how to approach this stuff. If you go to your local game store and you bring a bingo card with cognitive biases, you're going to leave with a bunch of squares marked before you head home, right? I mean, you can just see this. It's rampant all around us. I mean, this is natural human kind of innate stuff. So it makes sense that you would see it everywhere. And of course, there's a lot of room for improvement in all of us. Even people that have been practicing and trying for a long time always have some room for improvement there. And some of these biases are more damaging to your improvement than others. But the key is that we only have so many things we can focus on, and we can be really good at a time. It's just true. Like, people just can't be great at everything. The people that are really good at stuff have focused on it for a long period of time and really put their time and effort in. And if you are wasting your time with these fallacies, if you're spending your time getting frustrated at this, gambler's fallacy, if you're doing cognitive bias where you're just always moving the world around you to support your thoughts and your actions and never really challenging yourself on it, you're also taking away focus and attention from the part of the game that actually leads to results. And so, if anything, cutting down on these will free up mental time, mental space, mental energy to getting better. And that's, of course, the whole goal of the show, is to get you better.
Yeah. And, we spend a lot of time and effort trying to enable that as best we can.
That's right.
And like you mentioned, even outside of magic, these things are super valuable to learn. And the example I've always given is once you understand that, as long as you make good decisions, bad things could still happen. It's just so much less frustrating when you get a flat tire or when you get an unanticipated bill in the mail or something. And it's like, well, with a bill, sometimes it's like you could have done something different. You get a parking ticket. It's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have parked there. But sometimes you just get a flat tire. Sometimes a bad thing just happens. Sometimes, like this week, my fridge just broke.
Yeah.
It was a manufacturer's defect. They're fixing it for free, but it's still a pain. I had to throw away a bunch of food. I don't have a fridge for a week and a half. I had to use a mini fridge. It's horrible. So, but what am I going to do? Who am I going to get mad at in that case? It's not like there's anyone I can be like, oh yeah, I'll get mad at GE because their fridge didn't work. Well, they don't care.
No.
They're going to do what they're obviously they are going to pay to fix it. So I guess in that sense they feel obligated, but it's still it's the sort of thing where you do your best to give yourself the best outcome, but accept that sometimes life does not provide you with good outcomes.
Yeah, I think the big picture on the life stuff like that, to go off of what you're saying there, Luis, is it is interesting because you'd be amazed at how many fewer bad beats you take when you kind of can fully conceptualize the decisions that you make in your life. Like a perfectly good example is your fridge. You knew innately when you bought the fridge that some percentage of the time that fridge would break. If I asked you the day you came home with the fridge, I said, Luis, in 5 years, do you 100% expect that fridge to be up and running, perfectly functional, no matter what after 5 years? You would have said, of course not. There's a chance that it breaks. It probably won't, right? It's a good fridge. And I researched it and I got the good one, but it might. So when it happens, you go, this was part of the deal. I bought a fridge. Sometimes fridges break. That's it. And like you said, what are you going to do? Get mad? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't help anything. There's nobody to actually get mad at. So you just say, this is part of the deal. This is part of fridge ownership, and when it comes to things like tires and stuff, I'm a big advocate for having an emergency fund, right? It sucks. You have to set aside money that you maybe could use otherwise. But if you can set aside a little bit to cover those type of things, it goes such a long way to making a thing like a flat tire into just kind of an annoyance rather than an emergency where you're like, oh my God, right? Because again, to me, if you're going to own and operate a car, if you ask anybody, is there a chance you could get a flat tire as the owner of a car? They would say, yeah, that does happen. But then you say, if you did, would you have what you needed to do on hand to take care of it? Most people will say no. They're just like, I just hope it doesn't happen. And then when it does, it's an emergency. It's like, crap, this is going to be expensive. And again, that's where you're looking internally and saying, what can I do? Could I set aside a little bit of money for a tire or a leaky faucet or whatever the things that do tend to come up in life?
Well, I think, to not to introduce more cognitive biases here but people also don't like thinking about bad things.
True.
So
True.
One of the things that stops people from preparing for bad outcomes is you should have, you should have one of those anti-choking things in your car in case when your kid starts choking. And it's that's horrible. I don't want to think about that. But it's yeah, but you should still get it.
You should still get it.
You should still have, maybe you don't change your own tire. Maybe you have AAA or something. That's fine. Just as long as you're prepared for that outcome, as long as you have thought about the bad thing and have taken steps to mitigate it the best you can.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, let's call it a show there, Luis. Great stuff. Hopefully helpful to our listeners as well. And man, we got such great news today with the Vintage Cube on Arena. And
super cool stuff. In the short term, I'm excited for the thing that's happening next week. In the long term, I'm excited for the thing that's happening in a year and a half.
Yeah, so cool. I am really, really pleased with that. It does feel like in the modern era of Magic, we can get a little bit overshadowed by, universes beyond Commander, like some of the big money-making things that are happening at Wizards of the Coast right now. But this to me is a very, very big show that they say, no, we get it. We know that limited's important to you. And that's awesome. Some stuff to look forward to for us limited players. If you want to find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis's LSV, pretty much everywhere. You can find everything related to the podcast over at lrcast.com. Again, I'll put link in the show notes to both of the articles about the announcements, and then also both of Luis's Vintage Cube videos on Arena, so you can get a chance to get his early thoughts. And there's some fairly sick games in those, I will say as well. We also want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters as well as Ultimate Guard for supporting the show. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
I just want to talk a little more about Booster Tutor, because this card was getting discussed on the subreddit of how good is this card. So it's for those who haven't played it, it's a black instant. It says open a pack of magic, pick a card, you reveal it, pick a card, and put it in your hand.
So you cast it from your hand in game, and then a random booster pack appears before you, and you get one of those cards to go into your hand.
Well, a cube pack, not a booster pack.
A cube pack.
So,
but it is a randomized cube pack.
Yes, they I think wisely did not try to figure out what were the other cards in this draft. Well, you can't show those. If you open Black Lotus and it's in your deck, you could open one in a Booster Tutor, is my understanding. I don't know for sure, but I think that's the more fun and easier implementation, so it seems kind of like a slam dunk.
Yeah.
In any case, this card is really strong. Compare it to Ponder. Ponder is a card that when you take it 5th pick in the Vintage Cube, you don't feel bad and you always play it. Right. Mm-hmm. It's a good card, or preordained. These cards are good. I've first picked these cards, and it's not the first pick you want, but these are really good cards. Booster Tutor is incredible. When you open a pack of cube, you're going to be able to get a land if you want it. It might not be the exact land you want, but if you're looking for a land drop, it's unlikely you open a pack of cube with 0 lands in it.
Yeah.
You can open removal spell very often, right? You do have to cast the card, so it's better in a multicolor deck. But even if you're blue-black, you're going to have your option of a couple different blue or black cards or a land. But the other thing is you can also open Black Lotus or Time Walk. You can open these really busted cards. I think it's just a super power. The way I would view it is not a demonic tutor. It's actually less that. I would view it as a super powerful cantrip that lets you spend 1 mana to look at 15 cards and put one in your hand. That is an incredible card. So Booster Tutor, besides being a ton of fun, it is really powerful. The fact that it's powerful has never really mattered because this is my paper cube, and in my experience, people just always first pick this card. It's so fun.
It's just so cool, yeah.
The good news for Booster Tutor Doors, it's also really good. You're allowed to first pick it. It's a fantastic deal.